Hello everyone, my name is Jesse Heisel. I'm a filmmaker, and if you're familiar with this channel, you'll know that the horror genre is what I'm all about. Now for this review, I wanted to go back to my roots, kind of start off where it all began when I started to make these reviews. By that, I wanted to go back to the filmmaker who I did my first review on, Rene Perez. Now, he has created a film just last year, and this film I'm going to review is entitled Little Red Riding Hood. And as you can tell by the ratings, this is going to be a fun review. Now, I like to start off this with kind of giving you a little backstory of what this film is, or attempted to be, as I should say. Little Red Riding Hood is off into the woods to get medicine to her grandma, which is basically like the original story. So that's all fine. And then we are met by this. He's either a wizard, sorcerer, a king, a combination of all three. Never really explained. But basically he's the evil guy. And pretty much he is wanting to entrap Little Red Riding Hood in his castle because he feeds on the suffering of others. And apparently he can only get their essence of suffering if they're in his castle, I guess. So what he does to bring Little Red Riding Hood into his castle is release his big bad wolf. So the big bad wolf goes out and finds Little Red in the woods and chases her into the castle, where the master, as he is called in the credits, is. And she can't get out because the castle is surrounded by a force field. Once you get in, you can't get out. And once she's in there, the master then releases all of his other creatures to basically chase her around and make her suffer, so he can then feed on the essence that pour out of her. And also halfway through the movie, there's also a warrior that gets lured into the castle as well by one of the master's creatures, who was a shapeshifter that changed into a beautiful woman and lured him into the castle as well. And they basically have to team up to defeat the master and escape. So within saying that, the plot actually sounds kind of interesting. You know, knowing this stuff, you would actually think this could be a pretty entertaining film. Well, if you know Rene Perez films like I do, you'll know that's not what you're going to get. So now that you know the plot, I will start off with some of the things that I did like in the film, and then I will move on to the critiques, or basically what I didn't like. Basically, if you saw my last review of Perez's films, Playing with Dolls and Playing with Dolls Bloodlust, you're pretty much going to know how this review is going to go. So here are the things that I liked about Little Red Riding Hood. One of the things that I did like was the locations. He definitely knows some great locations to film at. The landscapes were beautiful. I mean, he shot in great mountain tops. The forestry looked amazing. Also, somehow he got a castle to film in. It was like an actual castle. It was filmed here in America, so I'm assuming the castle was just built for like a, I guess, museum purposes or something. Somehow he got the rights to film in a castle for a couple days or something. Definitely made the budget look higher than what it obviously is. So that's one thing I did like. Another thing that was good, passable, or whatever word you want to put, is the cinematography. He does know how to make some pretty good cinematography. I mean, the angles are usually good. There was a few shaky moments that I saw that got stabilized, in editing, and I also saw a couple of out of focus shots, but for the majority, cinematography and the camera work wasn't that bad. And yet again, seeing as how this is another Rene Perez film, I, as a filmmaker, as an independent filmmaker, I got to give credit where credit's due, because he basically was, yet again, a one-man crew. He was the writer, director, cinematographer, editor, pretty much everything crew-wise, it was all him. And, saying that, when you got to give respect, because just having one of those jobs is hard enough on a film set. Another thing that I got to give credit to is the guy does know how to make some enticing trailers. His movies aren't good, but his trailers are good enough to intrigue you into watching his films. That's I guess you should take that as a compliment, because the full product is not great, but the teaser trailers and trailers itself are usually good. They entice you enough to want to see more. So here comes the part of the video where I tell you what I didn't like about the film. And this is going to take up most of the video. By far the biggest issue with this film is that it can barely be considered a movie, because there really is no direction towards this film at all. There's nothing really happening in this film. Nothing can really be considered a plot. Basically what I told you, what the premise was basically my best bet of what this film was trying to be. But you really couldn't tell if you weren't focusing like I was on this film. Pretty much you get nothing for about 40 minutes, then you get the explanation of what the plot is, and then it just goes on. Like, if you went up to go to the bathroom in the middle of this film and then came back, you would most likely miss out on the scene where you finally get an explanation of what's going on. This film also, just like in his other films, have too much filler. He extends shots for way too long just to get it up to that feature-length runtime. Oh my god. Nothing really happens for about the first 40 minutes. And I'm not even exaggerating on that. Basically, the first 30 to 40 minutes is just shots of people walking. That's pretty much it. There's like a chase scene between the Big Bad Wolf and Red Riding Hood, but then after that, it's literally just people walking around the woods or a castle for about 40 minutes. This film has more footage of people walking than the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So, if you're a guy who likes walking in his movies, then this movie's for you. Because, man. Another big issue with this film, and this would be clear to anyone that sees this movie, is the amateur ways of music placement. Basically what I mean by that is every main character has his or her own theme music. And literally every time that particular character is put on screen, their music starts to play. It doesn't matter if that character is on screen for a minute or 4 seconds. As soon as they are put on screen, their music plays. Every single time. There were literally parts in this film, happened multiple times, where it would cut to a shot of Little Red Riding Hood walking around somewhere, and then it would cut to the villain for about 5 seconds, and then it would cut straight back to Little Red. And within that 5 seconds, the music would stop for Little Red and go to the villain's music, and then right back to Little Red, their music would start up right where it got cut off, in between that little snippet of where the villain was. And that happened almost the entire movie. It was completely obvious. It was completely amateur. And it was just a distraction. It was terrible. Well, a big reason for why that was happening, where I can kind of understand it, but I still disagree with it, is because most of this film is silent. I would say about 90% of this movie, there is no dialogue. It's literally just music playing over people walking around. And then here and there, there'd be a couple lines of dialogue, which, by the way, were badly dubbed. Most of the dialogue was dubbed over, and it wasn't even dubbed over well. You would have people talking in the middle of the forest, but the dubbing of their voices sounded like they just recorded it in someone's living room. And I'm not even joking. You can literally hear the reverb of the audio bouncing off walls from where they recorded it. It's awful. It's just awful. Another thing I wanted to pick up on to discuss was the costumes and creatures. The creatures in this movie and the costumes themselves they're kind of mixed. They're a mixture between god-awful and slightly passable. There are some costumes like the Big Bad Wolf, which were god-awful. I mean, you could clearly tell that it was a mask and a cheaply bought werewolf costume from just like a Halloween store. And then you had other monsters and creatures in this film where, if it was lit properly, they could actually be pretty passable. I mean, some of the masks are pretty good. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, some of them actually were functioning to where they could have movable mouths with the actors, and that was pretty good. Granted, whenever they turned their head, you could see the mask in the back, so that's not good. And then comes the acting. I mean, not a really big surprise that it was not good. I mean, it was bad. I mean, there's not much. I mean, granted, there wasn't much dialogue for you to really judge the acting on, but there was enough to know that it was bad. Like the warrior, the character who got lured into the castle by the shapeshifter, he was by far the worst because his voice acting was all dubbed, and it was trying way too hard to sound manly. It was basically like this. It kind of reminded me of the voiceover actor from the video game Postal, where basically the voice acting was like this. It was like, "I'm a warrior, and it's time for me to stop this villain." There was literally a line where it was like, "I've once fought many people who tried to force their religion on me in the past." And it just made no sense to what he was talking about most of the time, and it's just that overly manly cliche voice that people do. It was comedic at best. It was not good, and no one else in this film was good either. But probably the biggest criticism that I could give, or problem that I should say I have with this film, is that there really wasn't any direction in this film. And I mean that full-heartedly. I mean, it had no idea what to do with this film. I could literally see that Rene wrote probably 35 pages, filmed some stuff, and when he got to editing, he realized he only had about 50 minutes worth of footage into this movie. And then he just realized he had to just film some more people walking and add a subplot that made absolutely no sense. The subplot, I guess, I don't even know if you can consider it a subplot. I just kind of consider it a cheating way of getting to a full feature-length runtime. Basically, what I'm saying was there was a subplot where about 30 minutes of the movie was done in like a period piece time. Like, you're supposed to imagine this film is in like the 1600s or whenever castles were the thing. So, I was fine with that and everything. Warriors, princesses, kings, all that stuff. So you're supposed to imagine this as a period piece. Then, out of nowhere, we cut to this shot of a present-day woman taking photography of the mountains and vlogging about her experience of being a photographer. And then, out of nowhere, she is then being chased by the same creatures that are chasing the people in the castle. And then she ends up running to a house because one of the creatures chases her there. And in the house is the king, who's also at the same time at the castle. And he ends up chasing her around the house and killing her and taking all of her suffering essence. And then in the next couple shots, he's back at the castle, not the house that he was at chasing the woman. And then that subplot just ends. If you're confused by that, you should be, because it makes no sense. There's no connection at all towards Little Red Riding Hood and this warrior and this modern day woman. They don't even end up in the same place. It's like Little Red Riding Hood and the warrior at the castle. It has a force field. And then this random photographer gets trapped in a house with the king, who's supposed to be at the castle. It's not like the house and the castle were connected by a tunnel or something, because that's what I originally thought they were doing. But that would be giving this film too much credit, because that part had no reasoning to be in this movie at all. It made zero sense. It had no development, no reasoning, no purpose towards our actual main characters. They never meet. It's just happening. That's basically what it is. That's basically what this film is. Things are just happening, and there's no explanation to why it's happening. We don't... So in conclusion, this is not a good movie at all. This barely can be considered a film. It was clearly just made to make a quick buck off of the title, and there's no story, no character development. There's some good cinematography and some really nice looking shots of landscapes of mountains and castles, But besides that, there is just no story in this film at all. There is nothing great about this film. I mean, granted, I'm not as mad with this film like I was with Renee's other film, Playing with Dolls, because there I was expecting at least a good film, or at least a decent film. But with this one, seeing as I've already seen those films, I was already expecting a bad film. You know, I wasn't being tricked this time. Going into this movie, I already knew I was going to see a completely awful film. So all in all, the rating on IMDb right now for Little Red Riding Hood is a whopping 1.6. So the question of the day is, do I agree with this rating? Absolutely. I agree with this rating 100% because this movie is terrible. It's not good at all. I can't imagine anyone seeing this as a great piece of art. This is just literally made for a quick buck, and it barely had a plot to it. So, yes, I completely agree. A 1.6 is a very accurate rating for this film. So, I don't recommend this movie at all. I mean, if you want to go see this terrible film, like, that's kind of why I decided to watch it, because for some reason I like torturing myself with bad movies. I don't know, I'm into that, I guess. So, I mean, if you are into watching terribly made movies, then hey, go ahead. But if you're actually wanting to see a good movie, a good fairy tale movie or something like that, go somewhere else. You're not going to get that. You're going to be disappointed. Don't rent this. Don't buy it. Don't support this type of bad filmmaking. There are plenty of great independent filmmakers out there. So go support them instead. So I hope you enjoyed this review. My name is Jesse Heisel, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.